Good afternoon, everyone. This is Tara LoCastro. It's my pleasure to be here this afternoon and all week at the National Home Care Cooperative Conference. We're talking today about the art of referral partnerships, which is a crucial conversation, especially in the current market that we have and the last couple of years that we've come through. Just a little bit about myself. I have a unique perspective on home care, having been a caregiver for two of my family members for long-term health conditions. So I've navigated the entire continuum of care, and that led me into home care as a healthcare leader, running home care programs, long-term home health care, and building businesses that serve people in their homes. And currently I'm an independent consultant, principal of LifeSync, working preferably with home and community-based services, and my passion for home care continues. So I'm just thrilled to be here today and have the privilege of sharing some insights with you about the art of referral partnerships. Next slide. So as I mentioned, my name again is Tara LoCastro, and we're talking about the art of referral partnerships today. Next slide. So the art of referral partnerships. First off, we're talking about a brand, a product or service, the user, and in this context, it would be the client or family, equaling some sort of value that they're receiving, preferably the care and the service in their home. So in the case of home care co-ops, it's your name, your co-op, the services that you're providing, the experiences of your clients, as well as some of the partners and networks that you might actually engage with and the value that they're receiving. And the interesting part of referral partnerships is the art. And the art in this context is about distinguishing yourself from others. It's a large market. There's a lot of players involved, and being unique and different is the art part of this conversation. And as you may know, a referral is when someone in your network recommends your business to a new prospect because of that value. And referrals can be organic from personal word of mouth, which I understand in the home care co-op space is tremendous, as it is in many businesses, but particularly in home care co-ops. Or it can be from inorganic sources like marketing or advertising or other things that we'll talk about in this conversation. Next slide. So a little bit of a story. I went to a conference several years ago, and on one of the times that we had to do our own thing in the local area, I went to a museum in St. Louis, Missouri, and I was really surprised because I had no idea that Chihuly would be exhibited at the museum while I was there. And I'm not sure how many of you are familiar with Chihuly, but if you're not, you're in for a treat. These are just a couple of the glass-blown structures that you can see online of the work. And the reason I'm talking about this is because it really is an art. And a quote from Chihuly here on the slide is that, "I want people to be overwhelmed with light and color in some way that they've never experienced." And that really goes back to being unique and remarkable. And so again, this was an experience that I had that was ideally, a surprise that now I'm sharing with you. So let's keep in mind that this is about an experience that's unique from any other that you are recalling and remarking about, and that's what I'm doing right now. Next slide. So today's discussion topics include these, and I do want to mention that the things that I'm going to mention can apply to a home care co-op at any stage in its development, whether it's brand new, just getting started, or established, because these exercises and topics that we're talking about really need to be pursued at all stages, including existing. So if you've got information and you're already established, you should always go back to the drawing table and talk about these particular topics to refresh and evolve. And as a new market entrant, these are really important steps to take. So it's an advantage to do it early. And in fact, think about partners as you're launching into a market. Next slide. So another beautiful representation of unique. These are glass blown vases by Chihuly. And the point here is that it's kind of synonymous with the home care market, if you will. There's a lot of different players. However, preferably each is unique. And I guess, I wanted to point out that even though they're the same form, they're all beautiful and they're remarkable with unique features in their own. So I think that if we keep in mind that, your home care co-op is in a market and there's a lot of new players and they're coming on rapidly, especially due to some of the recent market dynamics, that you can and should really differentiate yourself. Next slide. So the first step in getting prepared, I'm not sure if we had a glitch here, but the first step in getting positioned for referrals is to do a market assessment. And I'm going to pause to see if the slides will be coming back. And there they are. So market assessment and target market. Target market, well, the prior slide, I guess if we could go back to that, I think that's where we left off. Yeah, market insights. So once again, if you're in the stage of launching a new home care co-op or you're already, this is something that you should be doing regularly anyway. So assessing the market, getting a sense of what's going on. There's been so many changes in the last year or two that this is important to go back to the beginning of time to see what's changed. Certainly supply and demand has had a radical move in the last recent months with a surge in demand for home-based services and aging in place, turning really with the spotlight on it. What are the existing services in the area? Some places are dense and they've got a lot of players with multiple services and others don't. Unmet needs, and this is something we should really be talking a lot more about in terms of what are the needs in the market that have been unmet and maybe that are new unmet needs. And I look forward to chatting about that, in fact, when we have some Q&A. Social determinants, we see this really listed everywhere. Social determinants of health, very important. Right now, there's a lot of, and even during the pandemic, isolation and loneliness certainly are within that umbrella, and to be very sensitive to that and aware as part of your market gathering and insight gathering. And then service networks, there may have been some that existed a year ago that are no longer, and then some that have formed, but really just having your finger on the pulse of what's going on in your immediate market is a needs assessment that should be done at least annually, I would say, and more so as you're entering for sure. Next slide. Target market. So there's a sense of the overall market, but then there's the focus, electing and selecting which area you're going to focus on. So you could, gather service area maps. If you have them already, good. You can always take a look at them and determine, gee, are there adjacencies that you would want to enter? Certainly living communities like assisted living, independent living, those are areas that you should be considering as part of your target market assessment, especially in terms of home-based care. Neighborhoods, this is an interesting concept that I'll present here, in that here, at least in New York, there are neighborhoods that can qualify for what's known as naturally occurring retirement communities. And it's basically an area, a neighborhood that tends to have certain demographics of people 55 and up that would benefit from having services. So this could potentially be a brand new target market that folks are not necessarily even thinking about at this point, in addition to the organized communities like assisted living and independent living. Certainly the demographics to be understood as they're evolving. Age is one, but there's so much more to demographics in terms of culture, and we also need to talk a lot more about that as we get into your differentiators. Here we have again the needs, social determinants of health in parentheses here on the visual. You can see psychographic, social graphic, behavioral. And once again, loneliness and isolation are really important social determinants of health to try and incorporate into your value proposition, which we're going to get into. Access in the target market, understanding what the access to services is. Are they readily available? Is there mobility? Is there mass transportation? It's important to have a sense of access, because that's also a really important piece of the value proposition, is promoting and driving access to having needs met. And then, of course, considering resources and funds. I understand that a lot of the home care co-ops are funded, meaning with private pay clients. And that is a huge market that is growing more and more as you read in the industry news, people entering the private pay market at a rate, quite frankly, that I've never seen. Other resources would include payer mix, and we will talk about that a bit as well in terms of expanding into private, commercial, as well as other government sources like the VA. Next slide. So here we have another beautiful example of Chihuly. And this is in the desert, and it's actually a current exhibit in Scottsdale, Arizona. And I guess my point in this is that this is a very unique piece, and it appears to be in the desert all by itself, but it's really there to be discovered. And it is a gem, and it is remarkable, and it's unique, and it's worth talking about. So even though, again, it's in the desert, it is not really alone until it's, it's discovered. Next slide. And I would encourage you to take a look and pause at the Chihuly work on your own time as well. But I just find it, again, remarkable. So I'm referring Chihuly to you as a piece of art that I found impressive. So as we talk about the value proposition, the components usually involve a mission and vision and a services outline. Now, hopefully you have that, and if you don't, that's fine. That's something that can come together because it feeds your value proposition. Or if you don't have one yet, because you're in the new stages, you can certainly use this conversation today to help feed your mission, vision, and services development. So it's a two-way street. It's not necessarily a recipe, but these are the components that will make up a good, solid value proposition. In addition, there are features, benefits, and very importantly, the theme of this conversation around the art is differentiating and having unique selling points. And we'll talk a little bit about that. Key differentiators. It's one thing to say being different, or, being able to say that, we're more this or that, but you also have to be able to prove that and to stand out. And we'll work on that together when we go through an exercise. Knowing the value is really important. Everybody involved in the agency should have a sense of why they're different. It really does make a difference when there's a lot of different players in a market to be able to talk to a prospective referral partner about the differentiators in the value, or how you want to work together with them to help them solve maybe a piece of business that they're not currently providing, and you can become that partner. So having a value pitch is really important, and having it practiced and as part of how you introduce your services to anyone, really, whether it be a friend, a professional service provider, or an actual formal network. A quote down below kind of captivates the idea that nowadays people know the price of everything and the value of nothing. So it's very important to underscore that value is something to really be understood and clearly conveyed in terms of the differentiators that your home care co-op is providing, or can provide, or is willing to provide. Next slide. So here we have a visual of the value proposition, and we've just talked about all of the components that really feed into it. So it's also nice to have a visual You've got the target market, and we talked about bringing that together and even honing and refining it if you're existing. You know, the markets change all the time. Understanding what the emotional as well as physical pain points are. In business, it's really about understanding the partner's pain points, perhaps, you know, maybe something that you can help. Maybe they're short on their own capacity and want to, you know, work with you to leverage your capacity. Maybe it's a client that, you know, needs to have support at home. So knowing pain points is important. And, you know, again, the term pain points can be from a business standpoint or a client standpoint. And then the tangible benefits that can be delivered. And I would say that, you know, experience of a service that you receive is tangible. So the benefits are resolving the need to get care in your home. Whether if you're the client, the benefits could be from a partner perspective of, geez, you know, we're not able to supply that particular type of service. So that's a tangible benefit that's being delivered by you as in your value proposition. And then, of course, very importantly, the differentiation, the unique selling points that you have are the competitive reasons that your value proposition will get you additional referrals. And, you know, in terms of credibility in the market. Next slide. So here we are with a very unique piece of glass produced again by Chihuly. And it's stated that no snowflake is unique, or no snowflake is the same. They're all completely different. So you know, they're beautiful, but there's none like it. And I think that as a home care co-op, you really want to participate in an industry as a sector within it in a very unique way. And certainly I think that this is demonstrated through the art in this case, and, you know, the art that you will also embrace and how you share your value to others. The next slide. So one of the things that I'd like to do now is give you an opportunity. I'm going to pause, and I know I've given a lot of information. So, you know, we're going to take about 5 minutes to go into breakout rooms to really talk about, maybe, you know, work on it together in building a very rough draft, or just do it conceptually, verbally is fine too. But begin to think about how your services help your target market, and, you know, what it is that the pain points that you're satisfying and how you're doing that. This is really a rough sketch for the beginning of a value proposition, which really is a very important tool as you start to talk about building referral partnerships. So if we could, I'd like to have folks enter into breakout rooms just for a few minutes, and then we'll come back and hopefully share a few examples, because this is really the foundational work in terms of motivating referral partnerships. Okay, there was a question, how many caregivers participated with the Story Collaborative and what was the process like? So it sounds like there was a tool or a resource available to help develop value propositions somewhere.
Sarah, are you able to hear me? This is Katrina.
This is Tara, I can hear.
Hey, yeah, this is Katrina from the ICA group. I can share just really quickly on the Story Collaborative piece.
Oh, good.
Yeah, we ran a 4-week workshop, basically kind of intensive with Story Collaborative, really developing and really looking at value propositions, but also really looking at the buyer's journey as a concept where you're pulling from the emotional journey, or really drawing on the emotional journey that people are going on as they interact with your agency. So whether a caregiver looking for work and considering your organization for employment, or a client that is looking for services, or maybe a family member looking for services for their loved one. It's really speaking to that emotional journey and how do you meet people where they are at the different points of their journey. So we had 7 cooperatives that participated in that program. Yeah, and that ended just a couple of weeks ago, really.
Oh, good, good. So it's a fresh topic. Well, it has a lot of relevance in referral partnerships. So what was really important for today is to introduce it as part of the journey to promote and develop the partnerships. Having a value proposition is very important, you know, as you develop those relationships and being able to articulate it. So it sounds like there was an excellent resource available in training to do just that. And maybe that's something folks could circle back on, even, you know, if it's a resource. Katrina, is that something that would be available again or for reference to folks who weren't able to go?
Absolutely, yes. I can post some information on the WOBA app, and if there are others that are interested, I'd be happy to
Okay.
share information and potentially create a new group.
Excellent. Well, it's important. And this is just a teaser today to make sure that folks know that you really want to have these things in place before you venture out into networking to build referrals and partnerships. Because you want to have to, you know, appeal to the needs of that particular partner, and the differentiators that you possess and the value needs to be part of your conversation. So we can move on to the next slide unless somebody else has something to share. And I'd love to hear anybody else who thought about this for just even a few minutes today. Did something come to mind that's different than what we've been talking about? I did see somebody get excited about the cultural sensitivity piece, and I'm going to again encourage everybody to think about the diversity of your current co-op and the unique perspectives that some of your caregivers members do possess, and how to make sure that that's clear to others in the world when they might be able to refer you to say, you know, they really have a high sensitivity to a particular culture or particular need. I think a lot of folks don't necessarily think about it because they're so close to the services they're doing. So with that, we can move on to the next slide. Here's just a quick recap of some primary referral sources. This information is also available in I guess a newly published quick start guide that's I've referenced down at the bottom, but there's 3 primary referral sources. One is the direct marketing, which is mailings and promotions. And we'll talk about that too when we get into the outreach and engagement slide. Family, friends, and clients, apparently for existing co-ops, and you know, quite frankly, for many, word of mouth is the main driver of referrals. And word of mouth is the picture down below shows, has so many different avenues where you know, it can happen, you know, online with viral capacity for sharing. It can happen in person at parties or dinners or what have you, which might begin to take place now. Partner organizations is where we're headed here in terms of taking the referrals to the next level and building partnerships. And this can be for new and existing co-ops. So new co-ops could build a partner organization really at the ground level and introduce your coming together as a new entity, your value proposition, and preferably build a partnership at that level to invite referrals as you are growing your business, and you could potentially tailor some of your offerings around what that partner might need or not have in their own portfolio. For existing, you can do the same, except, you know, go back and understand, geez, you know, how can we complement your business and or fill needs that you're not able to? So it depends on the context, the stage of your co-op, as well as, you know, where that partner is in terms of their own roles. And so sometimes they're service organizations and other times they're not. So the next slide is a list of referral sources. So they can be agencies, organizations, or very importantly, people in particular roles. I'm not going to read the entire list here, but a couple of key individuals within large organizations, such as discharge planners and social workers, are probably some of the most important contacts to have, who should be aware of your co-op and very clearly in their mind understand what differentiates you from the others that they already have on their list, that they're referring to people who are, let's say, needing a safe discharge out of a hospital, and as a result of that, needing to get a referral to a home-based care provider. So developing relationships with people in those roles is really important. And I think that there's many different ways to do that. Identifying, number one, contacts that know who those folks are, being a member of organizations where social workers are members. And again, you can prompt your own word of mouth with a varying array of network referral sources, churches, organizations, such as the YMCA. There's all kinds of different potential referral sources depending on, where your target market is once again. The one I want to point out on this slide that I think is really important, and it goes back to a point from prior slides, is the online care finder services. This is the first place that adult children of parents who are aging will often go to find services for a parent that is out of state or not in the same area. So being listed on those care finder services online is really, really an important referral source. And being listed implies, again, that you've got a clear value proposition and the potential capacity. But sometimes you don't have capacity, which doesn't mean that you shouldn't still be listed. So for those of you who are in the home care co-op space and doing private pay services, I think, it's important to ask yourselves, well, where are we currently listed? Are we with the list of our even local agencies on aging? Most of them have a list of area providers, but very importantly, the ones that are national. I myself did a little searching, and you type in your zip code, and it's amazing to see who is listed. And where they are. And if you're not, I would strongly consider doing, a test yourself to say, put yourself in the position of an adult person who has an aging parent in another state and go through the exercise with your agency in mind. So those are just some thoughts. What resources would I recommend for that? Well, I think what I'll do is a follow-up, unless there's someone in this forum that knows of those that are listed, but there's some very large national care finder organizations on the web, and I'm not endorsing any one of them, but what I do think is important is to know who they are and which ones you might want to be listed with. So I'll take an action to follow up with a list so that you can take a look at those. But that's a big one. In addition to your local agencies on aging, which if you're not connected with them already, it would be important to do so and get on their directories. Being listed is step number one for visibility. Any other comments or questions about example referral sources from a network standpoint? Looking in the chat. I don't see any others. Okay, next slide. So here's another exercise. Maybe we don't need to go into a breakout. Maybe we'll just pause here, but referral sources and lead generation. So, there's a long list of options, and to select a few of the organizations, I guess my request is that if you haven't already, or don't already even have a list, identify now today at least 3 people or organizations by name and contact information that you would consider for outreach, just even considering the prior slide. And I certainly will give you a list of those online groups that you could consider as one of them. But if you would think about that, maybe even local into your own, let's say at the state level. I'll feedback on the national level, but at the state level, or even your county regional level, identify 3. If you don't already know the ins and outs of their services, you really need to do your homework first. If you're saying, well, gee, we'd really like to have a chat with, to develop a relationship with XYZ entity, be sure that you've done your homework and that you understand what they currently do and how you might fit into that given your value proposition. You always have to have your value proposition available when you're approaching any party. What does your co-op offer that they need? So that's table stakes. It's services at home that help keep people independent and age in place. However, and this is another conversation that should be discussed perhaps at depth in another forum, but about capacity. Do you have the number of caregivers, staff able to provide if and when you receive the referral? And capacity management is one of the trickier business operations dances, if you will, that need to happen. And there is a method to it in terms of keeping enough available. Yeah, therein lies the rub for sure. You almost have to build in capacity into your business operations to enable it. And at times, you might be running under capacity or over capacity, but you always need to have a buffer and in a way to grow your business. And it's unique for every operation. So I think that it's important to have a real good handle on, okay, how many current caregivers do you have? What's their total capacity? And to be sure that you're not marketing and offering something that you can't deliver on. Then there's the other catch-22, which is attracting and retaining the caregiver labor. And that's another discussion that I think warrants a deeper conversation in terms of getting caregivers. We're turning the corner. I'm an optimist. We are turning the corner on the whole situation with the pandemic. And I believe we're in a position now to see more hiring. And because of the unique position of home care co-ops being cultural, better pay, and some of the things that I strongly encourage you to go back to the benchmarking data and pull out, that there is an attraction factor for home care co-op recruiting more now than perhaps in the past due to everything that we've had happen in the last couple of years. So capacity management is an operational topic that warrants a whole separate discussion, but you would never want to advertise something you couldn't really deliver on, but you do want to always develop relationships to be prepared for those referrals that should come your way, given a good understanding and visibility of your value proposition. Ongoing outreach and engagement. It's not a one and done situation. So when you identify the 3 people or organizations, you're going to want to, be consistent, but not overly persistent, if you will. And if and when there's a contact, be efficient and reliable. It's very important not to drop the ball. Next slide. So this is an interesting conversation around making contact. Now, I'm just going to share with you some things from my own personal, having run a home care business, and how I've been approached and contacted by others who wanted to partner with my agency. First of all, a personal approach is number one. I would not recommend showing up unannounced. It's the equivalent of having your doorbell rang and somebody's trying to sell you something. It's not recommended. So what you do is you identify who it is that you've identified, perhaps 3 people or organizations from the last slide. And maybe you've got a name or maybe you don't. Let's say you have a name. One of the things that I found effective as a receiver of outreach was a personal card. that would be mailed, and it would make it into my office because it didn't look like junk mail. It was a personal card from a real person, introducing themselves with their business card and saying, hey, you know, we're in this space, we do this type of work, and we'd love to have, you know, a conversation with a personal real signature. And that's worked for me in terms of getting my attention. And by the time I get, you know, to receiving an email from them, I'm already inclined to open it and want to respond. In terms of approach, outreach, and engagement tactics, they do vary. You will want to customize them, but personal is always better. And to pace it with, you know, a managed time frame, you know, pause between, people are very busy. But don't give up. Maybe say there's a 3-tiered approach to the outreach. And also, I guess, in summary on this slide, I want to say the straight line isn't always the fastest route. That's always been a good piece of advice, in that it may not be going directly to the person that you put on that list, but you may want to start networking and ask for an introduction to that person. So there's indirect and direct ways to make that contact. Okay, in terms of timing, I think we're going to go to the next slide. And if there's a moderator on the line, let me know where we are on time.
Hi, Tara. We're actually just slightly over time.
Okay.
So if you have some closing remarks.
Okay. Okay.
You.
So the remaining slides are really about the building of the relationship, and trust is really critical. Seeking to understand, listening, and appealing to the needs after really understanding what they are. Being authentic and generous always goes a long way. Next slide. Building relations that are diverse and anchor with common ground. Very important. You never know what kind of partner might be best suited for you. So really think out of the box with diversity in mind. And next slide. These are a list of fundamental best practices that I would encourage everybody to embrace. Measuring satisfaction is probably the one. I've seen and heard a lot of how do we quantify our value. Well, satisfaction is really an important way to do that. And if you're not measuring it, it's something I would highly encourage. The rest of the things on the list are pretty basic, but something that will help you build, sustain, and grow referral partnerships. Next slide. This is a thank you for all of your time today. I hope I've sparked some interest, and we can talk about social media platforms at a point in time. I'm not sure I have any recommended at the moment, but I think that the new Elevate co-op, secondary co-op, should be able to help with social media platforms. And then here's one final Q&A slide, which I think we can take offline into the Whova app. I am available there, and I'd love to keep the conversation going with Q&A and sharing of best practices. So thank you for your time.